Welcome to your Healing Place podcast with Linda and Mindy. It is our desire to address common concerns of how abortion and faith intersect in order to validate the emotional pain and grief that abortion can bring and give hope that recovery is possible.
I just thought it was, embarrassing and silly and, but I also knew a lot about sex at that point because I had seen and been exposed to so much, playing doctor with the little boys in the neighborhood and that kind of stuff also, well before this. So it was just another person, but I can't remember exactly how I wound up the night that he tried to rape me. But I mean, he molested me and he didn't just say, okay, I'm going to rape you now. It was like, I just remember being in his room and it was nighttime and I think my parents were asleep and he was, just in bed with me trying to do his thing. And I just said, to me, it's just flashes of images and things like that. But there was something about it that wasn't, it was the first time I had really felt like violated by somebody else or out of power, where it wasn't just, I'll show you yours if you show me mine type stuff. This went way over my head. I didn't really understand what was totally happening. And afterwards, he did run away after that. So it was by, I think, God's grace that he didn't wind up staying because he would have been able to eventually get what he wanted.
Yeah.
But after that, I think the risky behavior, Dr. Allender talks in his book about, it's like you send out a letter inviting people to abuse you after that, because you're so much more vulnerable after that first time. And, there was a couple things that would happen, kind of date rape situation where probably I was being foolish in my dating and making myself vulnerable, but at the same time saying no. And and I've had another girlfriend, and she and I have talked about this before, where sometimes you knew if you didn't give in, it was going to get to that point where you were going to get raped. So just a real skewed perspective of who I was and where I could say no, taking a big risk and then feeling that, well, since I've been so risky, I have to keep going because I wouldn't want to
Somehow
be one
it's
of
your
those.
fault. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Just
how
never,
did it
never,
how
go
did
ahead.
it form the thoughts about yourself, what you thought about yourself?
Well, I think shame is a key element in this, where you think you kind of have this weird, well, at least for me, I had this weird feeling like everybody had a secret life. And at the same time, I was different than other people. I was worse.
Mm-hmm.
So I had these two things going on, and not really understanding that it could be any different. That this was just my life. And also, ambivalent towards sex. And, it's my power tool. I could control people. I could, but miserable,
Yeah.
wanted the control, wanted to anchor on to somebody, to be able to hold on to somebody. But at the same time, not really understanding how to truly be vulnerable, intimate in a way that is pure. It was all
Healthy.
tainted. Yeah.
Yeah.
All tainted with just kind of,
Yeah.
like this, like it was a big game.
Definitely.
You got to know how to play the game. You got to know how to survive, that kind of thing, rather than what it really is and
Yeah.
meant to be.
So you find this book and it's like a spotlight on you or on the book and you get it. And is this sort of your turning point to understanding that you needed healing?
Yeah, I think I was reading the book because it was funny. My sister and her husband were both kind of giving me a hard time when I was reading, and I was at their house. I was there visiting, and I'm reading this book, and I just can't put it down. This is a big book. It's not something that's small, and a lot of technical stuff in it. I just been listening to it recently. I can't believe that long ago this book was so instrumental, but I could see myself in so many of its pages. It describes personalities of people who have been abused, and it describes, you know, that your problem is really sin. I mean, sexual abuse definitely is like a truck hitting you, but um, sin is your true problem, and there's a solution for that. Jesus Christ, and so it gave me hope. It started to separate me from the lies that I believed about myself, the things that I thought were part of me that actually came through the abuse, especially in the personality part. I think, yeah, I think that it was a combination of hearing the Lord's voice, having Him bring the truth to light, and really just trying hard to follow after Him after that. I started to really hunger and thirst for God's word, get involved in church, get involved in Bible study, and not everybody's ready for your story. That's the other thing is you go to church and you're like all excited. The Lord set me free from this terrible thing. Let me tell you all about it. And they look at you dumbfounded because they just can't
Well, you
believe
don't know how to share your story either.
Right.
You're sharing things they're like, I don't think I want to hear this.
Right. And not everybody was really, like not everybody there really understood. But I'm still glad because it still was through the church that I grew and developed.
Linda, I think you're talking to us, but you're on mute.
Sorry about that. And that's so true with our abortion stories as well, as well as the sexual abuse, is that people don't know what to do with it, number one. And number two, some of them have gone through the same thing, and it's painful for them to hear it because it brings up their secrets.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
So, Christy, I want to ask you just a little bit about this process of healing, because, we can listen to your story and it sounds like, oh, she went from living this lifestyle, feeling this way, to reading this book, to getting into church, and poof, it's all beautiful.
All was better and blissful.
Yeah.
Little birdies flying around. Yeah. No, It wasn't like that.
Give us an idea what that looked like.
Well, I think like it's funny to have to go back and kind of look because it's been, I'm 57 now, so it's been a while. And there are some like I was listening to the podcast you did recently on layers of healing, and I was thinking about that because it does seem like there were different stages throughout that time on of God taking me by the hand and saying, okay, it's time to deal with this, or it's time to deal with that, like bitterness and anger. I did a really good study on that because I wasn't being a very good mom. I had been a Christian a while, and I was still losing my temper in a way that just didn't seem to mesh. And or I would be struggling with unforgiveness, and it would just come up with me. And we've talked about this before about like, I'd be mad at God. Like, why did He give my friend such a great upbringing with great parents and no sexual abuse? Of course, she was a better mother than me. Why? I would be doing a lot better if I didn't have this past. So I think there's always that process of kind of God getting in and weeding your garden, as they say. It's just so. Kids, I have 3 sons, and certainly being taxed with, parenting, and we moved a lot. And, I just have this stuff that would come up, and it would just bring to the surface all of the things that were deep down in me, the anger, the rage, minimizing my sexual abuse. Well, he didn't really rape me, or it wasn't like it was a stranger, or it wasn't hugely violent. So minimizing that. And there's a saying in that book too that I really think it says, whether you were hit by a tricycle or a semi truck at 50 miles an hour, both do a lot of damage. And yeah, no, there are people who go through way worse stories, but I don't think we were meant to be used and abused, and our sexuality was never meant to be treated and used in the way that sexual abuse, pornography, all the things that go along with muddying those waters. I think we're meant for vulnerability, intimacy, love, cherished, and all of that stuff. And I think that when you have that kind of damage, it takes its toll. It affects and changes our personalities, but
especially at such young ages, 5, 8, when your personality is still forming and your view of yourself, that is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But the good news is, the Lord talks about, I will restore the years the locusts have eaten. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was pregnant with my third child, and uh, I was doing some ministry that I had ministered to me as a teenager, young life. I was at a camp, and it was a leadership thing. And I remember really grieving those years that I had lost, like, oh Lord, if I hadn't been so wild, I could have, instead of running around doing all these bad things, I could have been a leader. I could have been growing in my faith. And then I realized the Lord had restored almost every single thing I had said. I had done leadership. I had done,
Mm.
the things that I was grieving. I had done all that. And it was smaller. It was shorter period of time because now I was a mother and it's older.
Right.
But it was like he was waking me up and reminding me, like, look at what I've planted in your garden. Look at all that stuff that I've done. And I can honestly look back and just say, he can do it.
So now you are working with us and doing ministry with us. And this is not an area that you have experience with as far as abortion goes. But your past, you understand shame and you
Yes.
understand trauma and you understand abortion is all of those things. And I know that you have a heart for this. So if you could just briefly share with us what brought you into this work.
Another moment with the Lord, and I don't want to get into too much detail, but during COVID, I was in a job that was considered essential. So while we were in shutdown, um, my next door neighbor died, like in my yard, and at the time, we didn't know anything about what was going on. So I thought people were going to start dropping like flies. I thought everybody's going to die. This is it. We're going to stand before God. I was like, I mean, it's not a funny thing because a lot of people did die and stuff, but I just mean, like, I really thought it was going to be, um,
None of us knew.
yeah.
We didn't
So
at first.
I remember I was driving to work and I was asking the Lord, like, is this it, Lord? Am I going to be standing before you soon? Like, what is going on? And I was really surprised because he said, this is me saying that he said, so I don't, this guy, I take this with a grain of salt, but I just felt like he was saying, um, what did you do about abortion? And I thought, well, that's weird. I've done ministry for 30 years. Like, I've just been doing something else. I didn't think it really much about it. I don't know a lot about the pro-life ministry. I've voted. I've certainly been that way for a long time. And I had no idea, nothing, just was surprised. And then I met Mindy. We moved to Tennessee and I met Mindy, and she was telling me what she was doing. And I was like, yeah, I want to know more about that. And so it's been very much of, as I've been stepping into the role of being representing the church in these groups and being on the board and that kind of stuff, super educating, super enlightening about the struggle, the suffering, the desire to be whole and just have no concept of how to get there. And I certainly can relate to that. And I'm just really privileged to be to hear these stories, to be a part. We've done a small, what do you call it, intensive group, and I've done
A
one of
virtual
the
weekend. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and that was the first time I was in there, and we were doing the last part of the sessions, and I was nervous. I was really scared. We're doing memorial, and I was so surprised at how touched I was. It was, and it still is, just very moving. You feel like you're in a holy place during that time, and you have such heart for the women. And I was never anti-women, in any of my beliefs about abortion, but I didn't realize how much they needed a soft landing, somebody to listen and to encourage and to be careful about how we speak about these subjects. And I didn't realize so much of the church has had or is having abortions. and the women you may be in small group with, or the women you may be talking to just in your, having lunch, half of them could have had abortions.
Right.
It's sort of like sexual abuse. I remember the same things, though, about sexual abuse. You would be talking to 8 women in a small group, and 5 of them had been sexually abused.
Yes.
You have no idea. And
Yes.
I hope that through our ministry, women will realize, oh my gosh, we're so on your side. We so want to hear your story. We so want to help you through this. And the Lord is totally capable. If he can fix me, he can fix anybody. And I'm not fixed, but I should say, if he can heal me, he can heal anyone.
That's great. Christy, thank you so much for spending time with us, for being vulnerable to share your story and allowing us to get to know you a little bit better.
Well, I really, really am grateful to be here, and just thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. This podcast was inspired by the many conversations had through the years with women struggling from the emotional pain associated with abortion. Thank you for allowing us into your healing journey. Subscribe on major platforms where podcasts can be heard. Learn more about virtual abortion recovery healing at www.anevenplace.com. The link is in the show notes.